Greetings, April 1st, 1945, Moscow, Kremlin. The atmosphere that day was extremely tense, far from festive. The day before, an alarming message had arrived from across the ocean, from the Soviet intelligence resident in the USA. The Allies were hastily developing an operation to seize Berlin, the heart of the Third Reich. The Anglo-American command was eager to single-handedly reap the laurels of victory, being the first to enter the defeated city. The issue was so serious that the Supreme Commander-in-Chief was forced to urgently gather the front commanders in the Kremlin to collectively discuss the Allies' audacious claims. The final chord in this bloody war must be played by the Soviet soldier, by the Red Army. It is they and the Soviet people who have borne the incredible burden of this struggle on their shoulders. Stalin addressed the military leaders gathered in his office, with barely perceptible anxiety in his voice. "Your thoughts, comrades?" Ivan Konev, commander of the 1st Ukrainian Front, was the first to rise, confidently declaring, "Without a doubt, Comrade Stalin, and Berlin will fall under our banners before the Allies can even approach its walls." Rokossovsky and Zhukov exchanged meaningful glances. In essence, none of those present entertained the thought of defeat. The main question was who would have the honor of leading the victorious assault. It seemed that Ivan Stepanovich, wasting no time, was taking the bull by the horns, unequivocally hinting to the Supreme Commander that the 1st Ukrainian Front was the most prepared and effective force to carry out this historic mission. Subscribe to our channel, like this video, so you don't miss other exciting stories about World War II and learn the perspective of each side on the key events of those years. We offer you a multifaceted analysis based on various sources and testimonies. Konev, a native of the Volga Governorate, a region known as the Pearl of the Russian North. He was born into a large peasant family and from an early age knew hard work, helping his father in the fields. He received his primary education at a parochial school and then continued his studies at a 4-year Zemstvo school. Shortly before the outbreak of World War I, as a 15-year-old teenager, he found work as a laborer at a timber exchange. The work, admittedly, was grueling, requiring considerable physical endurance. World War I was in full swing when 19-year-old Ivan Konev, a strong, physically developed young man, was mobilized into the Russian Imperial Army. Initially, he was assigned to the Navy, but later plans changed. He received a new assignment to a reserve artillery brigade stationed in Morshinsk. It was there that Ivan Konev, a peasant son, went through all the stages of military science. And he didn't just go through them, he literally flew up the career ladder, soon receiving the rank of non-commissioned officer. Subsequently, the brigade was transferred to the Southwestern Front, where, having practically no time to take part in hostilities, it was disbanded in connection with the October Revolution. This concluded Konev's non-commissioned officer career. However, a new, much more interesting and promising stage of his life began. Returning to his native land, Ivan joined the Bolshevik Party. As a man with military experience, he was appointed military commissar of the Nikolsky district. The outbreak of the Civil War forced Ivan Konev to join the Red Army. Fate threw him to the other end of the country, to the Far East, fighting against the White Guards and Japanese interventionists. Konev continued his commissar activities, successively holding the positions of commissar of an armored train, a rifle brigade, and then the headquarters of the People's Revolutionary Army of the Far Eastern Republic (FER), created in March 1920. There is much evidence that he did not hide behind the backs of soldiers, but inspired the Red Army soldiers to a selfless struggle for a brighter future with his personal courage. In 1921, Ivan Konev was delegated to the 10th Congress of the RCP-B, which took place at the height of the Kronstadt Rebellion, the largest anti-Bolshevik uprising. It is a known fact that Ivan Konev appealed to the Presidium of the Congress with a written request to send him to Kronstadt to participate in suppressing the rebellion. Protégé of Kliment Voroshilov. Konev's commissar career was interrupted by Kliment Voroshilov, the first Red officer, he saw in Konev the makings of a talented commander. Enough, Ivan, playing secondary roles, the member of the USSR Revolutionary Military Council told him. Ivan heeded the advice. After completing advanced training courses for senior command personnel at the Frunze Military Academy in 1926, he received command of a rifle division. 6 years later, Konev again sat down at his desk, immersing himself in studies for 2 years in the special group of the Frunze Academy. In 1935, with the introduction of personal ranks in the Red Army, Konev became a Konev division commander. He commanded a corps, an army, and finally, the Transbaikal Military District. 6 months before the start of the Great Patriotic War, Lieutenant General Ivan Konev was transferred to the North Caucasian Military District. His chest was already decorated with the well-deserved military orders of the Red Banner and the Red Star. Of course, his career path was not without difficulties. Like many at that time, he did not escape the close attention of the state security agencies. Even during his period of command of a corps, compromising materials began to be collected on him. What accusations weren't contained in those denunciations? Accusations of concealing Kulak origins, assertions that he was grouping enemies of the people around him, and even mentions that his uncle allegedly served as a Uriadnik, a kind of police officer. By the spring of 1941, based on the collected denunciations, a report with accusations against Konev had been prepared, which landed on the desk of Georgy Malenkov, the chief personnel officer of the Bolsheviks. To Georgy Maximilianovich's credit, after reviewing the document, he put it in a safe. Now is not the time to scatter such personnel when war is on the doorstep, he thought. The report won't go anywhere, we'll get it if needed. The Vyazma Cauldron. The 19th Army, formed from units of the North Caucasian Military District and headed by Ivan Konev, was thrown onto the Western Front in the first days of the war. The successes of the 19th Army at the front were more than modest, practically none. However, as with most at that time, they retreated eastward with fighting. Near Smolensk, Konev's army was encircled, from which it barely escaped. And the Wehrmacht, meanwhile, relentlessly moved towards the capital, despite enormous losses comparable to those of the Red Army. Perhaps Konev retreated differently than other commanders? He was noticed, promoted to the rank of Colonel General, and entrusted with command of the Western Front. And it was under him that the catastrophe west of Vyazma occurred. Konev misjudged the enemy's intentions and did not guess the location of the main blow. The front's defenses were breached on the very first day. Konev, of course, attempted to eliminate the breakthrough, organizing a counterattack by the forces of a specially created operational group. But these actions were unsuccessful and did not bring results. For armies of the Western Front were encircled. The losses of the Red Army were monstrous. 380,000 killed and wounded, over 600,000 taken prisoner. The road to Moscow was open. It was these events that gave rise to a wave of panic in Moscow. It seemed that German motorcyclists were about to enter the city. In a desperate attempt to save the situation, the Soviet command threw poorly trained militiamen and cadets of military schools against the Wehrmacht's tank divisions. Only later did it become known that the defenders of Moscow received invaluable help from the encircled soldiers near Vyazma. Their courage, resilience, and desperate resistance gave Moscow precious time to organize its defenses. It was they who tied up significant enemy forces, preventing the German command from transferring them to the capital. Tribunal and the inevitability of punishment. Konev and his staff managed to avoid capture. Soon, a commission headed by Molotov and Voroshilov arrived from Moscow. The errors of the Western Front command were obvious, and the conclusion suggested itself: a tribunal and an inevitable sentence under the laws of wartime. The situation seemed hopeless. Even the presence of Voroshilov provided no guarantees. Klimek Yefimovich could only shrug his shoulders. At this critical moment, Georgy Zhukov, who by that time had already been appointed the new commander of the Western Front, intervened. Connect me with Comrade Stalin. He commanded the duty officer. Comrade Stalin. I personally vouch for Colonel General Konev. He did everything in his power under the circumstances. Joseph Vissarionovich. Now is not the time to lose such experienced commanders. I am sure that Konev will prove himself yet. All right, Comrade Zhukov, but under your personal responsibility. What are your suggestions for Konev's further fate? I propose appointing him as my deputy. A long pause hung in the receiver. Finally, Stalin said, "Well agreed. Prepare the corresponding order." Zhukov continued to support Ivan Konev, recommending him for the position of commander of the Kalinin Front. And as time showed, he was not mistaken. Ivan Stepanovich brilliantly proved himself in this post. The troops of the Kalinin Front played an important role in the Battle of Moscow. The threat of a tribunal hanging over Konev dissipated, and largely thanks to the intercession of Georgy Zhukov. In 1942, Konev's career was again threatened. The Western Front under his command conducted several unsuccessful operations near Rzhev. However, it was later recognized that the actions of the Western Front played an important role in the overall strategy, as they prevented the Wehrmacht from transferring significant forces to Stalingrad. The victory at Stalingrad was forged not only on the banks of the Volga, but also on other sectors of the front. Konev's military genius was fully revealed in the summer of 1943. His steppe front was in reserve and was to enter the battle in the event of a breakthrough in the defenses of the Central and Voronezh fronts. Fortunately, the defenses held, and the fresh forces of the steppe front going on the offensive liberated Belgorod in August and then Kharkov. Irresistibly advancing, Konev's troops took Poltava in September, then Kremenchuk, and having forced the Dnieper, captured a strategically important bridgehead on the right bank. Army General Ivan Konev, commanding the Second Ukrainian Front, formerly the Steppe Front, would conduct many more brilliant operations. The Korsun-Shevchenkivsky operation at the beginning of 1944 was particularly successful, during which the Second Ukrainian Front, together with the First Ukrainian Front of Army General Vatutin, routed 10 enemy divisions. In February 1944, Ivan Konev was awarded the rank of Marshal of the Soviet Union. Just a month later, he once again confirmed his skill as a commander. His front was the first to reach the state border of the USSR and continued the offensive westward into Romania. In July 1944, Ivan Konev was awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. And on that day, April 1st, 1945, only 60 kilometers remained to the capital of the Third Reich. Stalin, having gathered the commanders, did not reveal all his cards. The plan for the Berlin offensive operation was already ready. It remained only to approve the final details. Before the meeting, Stalin carefully studied the presented plan for the capture of Berlin and listened to the reports of the Chief of the General Staff, Alexei Antonov. It was Army General Antonov, based on the disposition of troops, who proposed the following distribution of tasks. First Belarusian Front under the command of Marshal Zhukov, the capture of Berlin. First Ukrainian Front under the command of Marshal Konev. A strike south of Berlin to cut off the main enemy forces from the Berlin grouping. Second Belarusian Front under the command of Marshal Rokossovsky. A strike north of Berlin to prevent possible enemy counterattacks. Despite the widespread belief, there was no rivalry between Zhukov, Rokossovsky, and Konev. Each of them clearly carried out the task assigned to them, and they performed brilliantly. Konev's troops did enter Berlin. The 3rd and 4th Tank Armies were already advancing towards the city center. However, the order soon came to turn around and begin the offensive on Prague. After the victory, Ivan Konev was awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union for the second time for his exemplary leadership of the troops in the final operations of the Great Patriotic War. One can only guess whether he harbored resentment towards Zhukov, to whom Stalin entrusted the capture of Berlin. There is no definitive answer to this question. It is known that during the period when Zhukov was Minister of Defense under Khrushchev and Konev was his first deputy, serious disagreements arose between them more than once. In the autumn of 1957, when Khrushchev and his associates launched a campaign against Zhukov, a devastating article appeared in the newspaper Pravda, in which the renowned military leader was subjected to harsh criticism. In particular, the article stated, Zhukov did not justify the party's trust, proved to be a politically untenable figure, prone to adventurism in understanding the most important tasks of the USSR's foreign policy and in leading the Ministry of Defense. The author of this article was Ivan Konev. As a result, Georgy Zhukov was removed from his post as Minister of Defense and dismissed from the army. Marshal Malinovsky took the post of Minister of Defense. Ivan Stepanovich Konev died in 1973. His ashes rest in the Kremlin wall, to the left of the mausoleum. He was an outstanding commander, a worthy son of the fatherland. Thank you for your attention. I was glad to see you on our channel. Don't forget to leave comments, like, and subscribe. See you again.